The premiere of Gangs of New York. Its director, Martin Scorsese, as much a star as the film's lead actors. It's his most ambitious film in a 30-year career and a startling new vision of the city's past.
I'm just fascinated by the history of New York, because the history of New York, to a certain extent, is the history of America, really, particularly in the 19th century.
Marty's always loved epics, and I know that it finally quenched a very deep thirst in him.
But at what price? Realizing the film's epic scale has cost $100 million and taken 3 challenging years of Scorsese's life. Is there too much riding on the film and the man? I've been writing about Martin Scorsese's work for years and his preoccupation with his own deep roots in New York, so often portrayed on screen. But this latest film isn't another slice of Italian-American life like Mean Streets or Goodfellas. It takes us back to a time when New York was more like a frontier town, violent and deeply divided. I've come to find out why this means so much to the grandson of Sicilian immigrants.
Wonderful. Okay.
Is the article any good?
Yeah, it is.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, it's very straight.
The film's main action is set in the 1860s, when nativists are fighting to keep America Protestant. Daniel Day-Lewis is a gang leader facing massive Irish Catholic immigration, and he expects these riffraff to know their place.
Oh, he's not from here, sir.
Young people today don't know about they don't get a sense of the history of the city or the history of the country in terms of the actual struggle within the country, especially in the 19th century, which turns out to be the most violent century in American history. Ultimately, the images that we wound up with in the picture, it just seemed to demonstrate this extraordinary struggle to be alive and to have individual freedom, in a sense, on a personal level, the struggle for the young man to achieve his own manhood.
That's close enough.
Your friend can't look me in the eye. That's not an admirable characteristic.
No one can look you in the eye, Bill.
What is your name?
Amsterdam, sir.
Amsterdam. I'm New York.
Early Manhattan was spectacularly recreated in Rome's Cinecittà studios, once famous for such classics as Ben-Hur and Cleopatra, and for Leone's spaghetti westerns. This was hallowed ground for Scorsese, and the only studio that could house a mile-long replica of what seemed to contemporary visitors like Dickens the world's worst slum. Scorsese grew up in the same area where the film is set, once Irish, but long known as Little Italy.
My grandparents came here at the turn of the century and, in a sense, recreated the life they knew in Sicily, in downtown New York, with all its customs, its rituals, its habits.
St. Patrick's Cathedral was the centre of that world, and it was here that the young Scorsese served as an altar boy and dreamed of becoming a priest. But years of childhood asthma would confine him indoors, where he devoured countless films on television, drew comic strips, and nourished another dream, to become a filmmaker.
Hey, Mickey, how you doing? Hi, how are you?
How are you?
Good to see you.
Observing its customs gave him the first lesson in the social rituals that are at the heart of all his films.
You're looking great.
I'm okay. We shot
Since you got rid of that damn beard.
I know. My father, being Sicilian-American, he could not do otherwise than to be dealing with the underworld that was around at the time, and many good friends of his were, I knew them as friends. I didn't know them as friends of the family. I didn't know them as what they did for a living, so to speak. And now you add to that some violence in the streets, and you add to that the sight of these men and women dying in the streets from the Bowery. People out of their minds drunk coming at you with broken bottles. There's danger. So that's how I grew up. That's how I see it. And ultimately, maybe I see it more threatening than other people, but I love the city.
At New York University in the early 60s, film was still a new subject, but Scorsese took every class he could and plunged into student filmmaking, which introduced him to some of his lifelong collaborators.
I met Marty at New York University when I signed up to take a 6-week summer course. And immediately after that, we joined a group of people who were making documentaries for television, and they were about the social issues of the time, the Vietnam War, desegregation in the South, poverty. And so we started making a lot of these documentaries in the streets, and it was tremendous fun and a great preparation for cutting improvisation later on in his movies.
In the winter of 1968, I was a young film reviewer and journalist, and I'd been assigned to do a story on a curious, burgeoning phenomenon called student filmmakers. And the filmmaker was Marty Scorsese. My collaboration with Marty grew out of our shared passion for movies. You love them and you want to do them. And this is, we'd grown up with the whole, not only aesthetic of the new wave, but with the very seemingly simple, emotional, vocational approach to making movies the new wave had, which is, want to make a movie? Just go and do it.
Scorsese felt liberated by European New Wave films from directors such as Truffaut, Bertolucci and Jean-Luc Godard.
There was something that was done to me when I was watching those films on TV that gave me more of a sense of truth there. The truth in the Hollywood films and other filmmakers, or the types of filmmaking genre, yes, it's there too. It's codified. It's coded. It's coded, and I learned that another way. But inevitably, I'll always go the other way, and that's what led to Mean Streets. In fact, when I was working on the script, it took me like 6-7 years to get it together myself. I would show it to my professor at NYU, Haig Manoogian, and he says, "Nobody wants to see this kind of thing. He says, what's the matter with you?" And he was a great teacher, and it was my inspiration all the time. But he was a guy we never really agreed upon on the films that we liked or disliked. When I wrote a term paper on The Third Man, in the first year in film history class, he was the teacher. I didn't know him then. I wrote the term paper, he gave me a B, and wrote on it, saying, "Don't forget, this is just a thriller."
Classic popular cinema would remain important to Scorsese as his films began to attract attention in festivals. But like his friends and fellow movie brats, Brian De Palma and George Lucas, he needed to find a personal voice amongst all these influences. That voice finally emerged in 1973 with his third feature, Mean Streets.
The coincidence of the timing and the enthusiasm of our whole generation was really wonderful. And there was a moment there when you really felt that the studios could accommodate themselves to anything, almost anything new, whether it was Easy Rider or Performance or Mean Streets.
What is that guy, crazy? Hey, Chuck, now's the time.
Mean Streets was a film about myself and some friends who lived downtown. If anybody who ever wanted to see what an Italian-American really lived like, of course, I do get into difficulty with this because there are many Italian-Americans, as we know, decent, hard-working people, and who had never had anything to do with anybody from the underworld.
It's beautiful the way Marty examines it, and of course the evocation of the neighborhood in which he grew up is so vivid. I mean, and you feel that in many of these scenes that you feel that he lived through it, exactly as he's showing it. And the use of music, of course, is just stunning in it. That was a big breakthrough in films, the way Marty used music. It paved the way for a lot of the use of rock and roll. There's a wonderful veracity to it, and of course, Marty was laying down in Mean Streets his editing style, very much influenced by the Russian filmmakers that Marty so much admired.